Well, wonderful to get a few minutes with Siddhant, who is a simulation scenario engineer at Motional. Siddhant, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, hi, Viraj. I'm excited to join you on this podcast. Hopefully, I can share a few good notes for everyone who's listening in.
Absolutely. Let's start with a quick introduction. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, I am a simulation scenario engineer right now at Motional, as you mentioned. That role actually encompasses a lot about um, doing simulation testing. So, for autonomous vehicles, so my company actually is into the automotive area, and what they are looking to do is get a large fleet of robo taxis out there. So I think our current agenda is by 2023, we want to roll out a large number of taxis in Las Vegas. To support that deployment, I am part of the sim test team where we actually validate the autonomous models in simulation. So that's what my current role is.
Got it.
Yeah.
Can you share something about your educational background?
Sure. So I did my undergrad from Purdue University, and I graduated in 2019. My major was in aerospace engineering, in which I specialized in controls and dynamics. And I did a minor as well in planetary sciences, which was because, at that time I was interested in space stuff. So I did that. After following just shortly after that, I did my master's at the University of Michigan, again in aerospace engineering. I graduated with my degree in 2019. Oh no, sorry, not 2019, 2021, 2021 May, and I specialized in autonomous systems and controls. Um, and yeah, I racked up quite a lot of research years in both my undergrad and graduate curriculum, so that helped me identify things that I was interested in.
Got it. So you joined University of Michigan in 2019 and graduated in May 2021, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when during this time did you start searching for full-time job opportunities?
Okay, so my situation might be very different from the like previous podcasts you've done, because I've seen a lot of them. So I would say I started my job search 2 weeks after I got my EAD card.
Got it.
So very late in the process. So I hope this sort of take helps people who are listening in. So 2 weeks in, after I got my EAD card, I actually started looking for jobs. The reason for that was because I was initially preparing to do a PhD, and just the transition period of that, I was looking to work with a professor at the University of Michigan. So we had a project lined up, but due to some shortcomings, and with COVID and everything, the project actually had a fallout. So unfortunately, I was pushed into this situation where I had my ED card in hand, but now I had like a limited amount of weeks to find a job. So it was very difficult in the beginning, I would say, because it felt a bit chaotic.
Mhm.
The job search, because I had so many questions in my mind about, okay, where should I begin and who should I reach out to? Are my connections my only savior now? Because I have like only 8 weeks or 9 weeks left before I have to leave the country. So I think my initial approach to that was first understanding what I wanted to do. So, as I mentioned from my educational background, I did rack up a lot of years in research. And what research work in both undergrad and graduate school helped me understand was what my strengths were.
Yeah.
And second, most importantly, where my interests lie and what kind of work would, keep my interest motivated. So, um, I think based on that, I identified few key areas, most of them being related to controls and autonomous systems.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So I also knew that both of those are applicable to robotics industries. So it was very clear to me that these are the few areas that I should target first.
Yeah.
Um, so like the third week of my EAD card, since I already had my EAD card, I was only looking at those companies. Um, the way I approached that was, number one was, I was fortunate enough that in my previous years I had kept in touch with the startup industry. So, just reading through magazines like TechCrunch. I also kept up with some of the University of Michigan startup and, the startups out of Purdue. So it helped me understand where to look for these companies and, how to do a good research around like which ones suit me best and, what their current financial situation is, because it made sense to me that I should apply to a startup company because over there I can demand the process to be faster. Because again, like as a reminder, I had few weeks left before I had to leave the country. If I would have applied to a bigger company, I know they have a set standard of interview process, right? Which can take months up to time. So I didn't want to waste my chances by just going all in on a big company. So I was intentionally looking for startups. Once I had curated a list of few companies I thought I had interest in and their portfolio looked nice,
Mhm.
I started reaching out to them, mainly through their website, and then finding if there are any jobs on LinkedIn. So that was, I think, my first week. After that, initial first week, I think I had more confidence in finding similar kind of jobs.
Yeah.
So on LinkedIn, it became much easier to, filter out options that I wanted to look at. One key area being understanding where the hotspots are for all these startups in the US.
Uh-huh.
So just for now, as in 2022, I think some of these hotspots are Boston, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Austin, Denver, Boulder, then Santa Monica and San Francisco. Obviously, those areas are like the Silicon Valley, so they still have prominence. And then Seattle. So it was very clear to me that it's in these cities that I have a higher chance of getting a shot at a company because many small companies are located around these regions. Um, so from my second week of job search, I was just focusing on these particular locations and finding jobs in through LinkedIn on them.
Got it.
Uh, yeah, so
No, that's great. I mean, you touched on some very interesting and insightful points. First, like you mentioned, right, you had the time crunch. So you knew that if you were to focus on large corporations, of course, the process is going to be longer. And so it might take some time to get through that. And you had that crunch of time. So it was
Mhm.
better to focus on the startups. And secondly,
Exactly.
you recognized your own strengths by looking at
Mhm.
your journey at Purdue and at University of Michigan, and then
Mhm.
you focused on roles that pertain to your strengths. And then finally, you were on top of the news of the startup world, I guess, right? You mentioned
Mhm.
TechCrunch, and then you were following all the startups from Purdue or even from University of Michigan. So just like
Mhm.
getting that knowledge through years helped you to kind of get this. So that was your initial approach. That's great.
Exactly.
Now, if you were to look back, would you have changed the approach you took for searching for jobs?
Um, Oh, definitely. I think the first one is more situation dependent. I would pray that I had more time to, get started with job search because I think technically it would have been much easier if I would have just started from the get-go after I graduated in May, even if I didn't know until my graduation that I wanted to look for a job, right? But if I would have just in hindsight started the process, I think um, even after I got my EAD, it would have made things a lot more smoother for me and less stressful, which is, I think, very important if you're giving interviews. So I think that would be the biggest one, having more time. But since I didn't have that, I'd probably focus on the other aspects I could have changed. The first one I would say is reaching out to more connections.
Yeah.
I thought that maybe the time process that it might take to reach out to a connection and them actually putting in your recommendation, through their intranet, like the company's intranet. I thought those situations might take time.
Yeah,
And I would be wasting time waiting for an opportunity to come rather than I when I could have just been at it. Because what happens is, if you put in your resume through a connection, if they do it on time, you hear back pretty quickly from the company, because of the way things are set up in the US, right? Because they actually value what their employees are suggesting and recommending. When I reached out to a few people, like very close family, like my brother's very close friends, my brother himself, so it became very clear that I'll get those opportunities. But then, you have to prepare for the interview, right? It's
sure.
not like you can go unprepared, because if your interview goes terribly, then it actually reflects bad on the people who have recommended you as well. So I didn't want to do that, because they are very near and dear ones to me who have recommended. So I asked only few people. And in that process, I realized that, okay, maybe I should be reaching out to companies by myself, because if I spend so much time preparing for one company and it doesn't fall through,
Mhm.
then I have lesser and lesser time to make good decisions, right? So I didn't want to be in that situation, and I think that was wrong. And the reason I'm saying that was wrong is because, um, in my hindsight, like going through interview process by yourself is very stressful, number one, and you never know what you need to prepare for. If you're going to interview for a company you have no idea about, and you have no point of contact, you don't know what the interview process is going to be like. You can't foresee what type of questions they can ask. But
Mhm.
if you have a contact in the company, they can actually streamline things for you, and they can explain what their interview process is like. They can um, guide you through the timeline. They can even connect you with more people who can help you out with the process. So that I value a lot now since I've started working, because it's very useful. And people, I didn't respect that at that time, and I feel like I should have used this. So yeah, so this is, I think, the biggest one. Reaching out to connections from both Purdue and University of Michigan, the friends I made, it would have
That's
been
great.
useful. Yeah. The second one I would say is leveraging my professional connections at both Purdue and University of Michigan.
Mhm.
So, like the professors and the research labs I worked at, they have pretty good collaborations with um, companies. Like University of Michigan has a very good tie-up with Ford, in Michigan area, and and like other automotive companies because of M City, which is University of Michigan's like autonomous driving area. So I should have reached out to them because I'm an alumni, and I felt like felt a little hesitancy, because for me, being from an aerospace background, made it a little bit awkward to
Mhm.
reach out to these people and ask for help. But I think I should have just done that, because it would have given me a clear path towards reaching out to more people and maybe having those connections.
Yeah,
So that's like the second thing that I think I should have done, is like leverage the university connections. And being from both Purdue and University of Michigan actually gives you a lot of like a very strong alumni network. So yeah, just being aware of that should have
would have helped.
maybe gotten me more opportunities.
Absolutely. You already touched on the next question in
Okay.
regards to like what did you do to actually get the interviews from the companies you applied for? I mean, I know you mentioned that you reached out to your close friends and your family members, tried to put in a referral and get the interview through that. Was there
Mhm.
anything else that you were doing to actually get the interviews from the companies you applied for?
Oh yeah. I think the number one thing for me which might have worked is I would make sure I write an offer letter. Sorry, not an offer letter. um, uh, the letter for intent. I think there's a
Definitely.
different word for it. I'm just missing it. But like the letter you give with your job application.
Yes.
So the letter of intent. I think it's useful because your resume might not talk a lot about your personality,
Hmm.
but the letter of intent actually helps you showcase that, and it helps tie up a lot of uh, things in your resume which the reader might assume are like gaps.
Yeah.
In my case, the gap being, oh, he's from an aerospace background, he's applying to robotics, autonomous system roles. Does he have the expertise? Can he do it?
Yes.
So like showcasing all that was very important for me. So I think the letter of intent was useful. The other thing I would say is just reaching out to um, the company itself helped
Yeah.
out. Because I think just submitting your resume, sure, is the most important process, but having a follow up after that is equally important. Um, so I got a couple of calls because of that, like the few initial screening phone calls, and I made sure, like, even after the screenings were done, I would reach out to the HR person and say, hey, I had a good time chatting with you. Love to know about the company a little bit more. Can you send me this information, that information? So that actually showcases that you're very interested, you're a
Hmm.
motivated individual, and that personality of yours will help them see you in a more positive way, even if you have a little bit of shortcomings. So like for example, me, the biggest question everyone would ask in the interview is, it doesn't seem like you have a lot of programming background
Hmm.
because you are in aerospace engineering. It's a very theoretical background. You guys don't use a lot of C++, this and that. So how do you explain yourself? So these questions, because they were asked so often, it sort of made me aware that it's my responsibility to tell them that it's not a shortcoming, it's in fact something I've worked on separately
Hmm.
apart from my education. So that's like a strength I have, that I can work on a lot of things. I'm always motivated, I'm a lifelong learner, etc., etc.
Yes.
So um, that helped quite a bit to get the interviews. And then lastly, I would say um, just understanding what the job application was asking for, like for that particular role,
Yeah.
is very, very important. I think this is probably one of the most important points, because what most people do is, and I made that mistake when I was like my first week of job applications. Like I would just read through the things they were looking for in a particular role, and after that I'll be like, oh, I think I matched this isn't, let me just submit my resume, like my generic resume,
Yes.
and I'll let them figure it out, what matches and what not. But that's completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think the moment I changed that, from my second week onwards, like when I started curating, or like just fleshing out my resume for like the particular job application, then it made a lot more sense. I got a lot more screening calls, and that was like a good building up step to get further interviews as well,
Got it.
because you know what those guys are looking for.
Absolutely.
uh, yeah.
You also touched on the next question in regards to how you prepared for your interviews. I know you
Mhm.
mentioned that you reached out to the folks who were working at the company and
Right.
then relaying on their expertise in regards to what you should be expecting for your interviews.
Mhm.
Anything else that you were doing to prepare for your interviews?
Um, yeah, absolutely. I think most of them were programming based. Like, once you are done with the screening call, there were very few instances where I actually got a call from the manager who just
Uh-huh.
wanted to have a chat before the
Yeah.
actual interview. But usually after the screening, the first interview itself was like a technical one. So just I was making sure I was prepared for those. My first few initial ones, which were from universities that I was applying to for like a research position and etc. they went kind of sideways for me because I was not expecting them to ask like so detailed questions. I thought, like the interview process, they'll probably ask me a little bit more about my work and then a little high level questions. I didn't think like, people were genuinely interested in asking very direct questions about their line of work.
Yeah.
So that took me by surprise, and I think it was a good learning curve for me, because like the next set of interviews I got from like my third week onwards went pretty well, because I knew what they were going to ask. I knew what to
Mhm.
expect, what type of programming examples or stuff they would want to see for this particular role, and what type of other things they might look for this type of role. So it gave me a pretty good handle on just the interview process itself,
Absolutely.
just understanding like the crux of what type of technical interviews I have to prepare for.
Got it.
Yeah.
Looking back now, would you have done something else to prepare for your interviews, or would you have changed your approach?
uh to be to be honest, I don't think I would,
Yeah.
because I think the way I did it was pretty efficient for my
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
um because what I was doing for my general preparation was every day I would solve some programming questions, but apart from that I would sort of go over subject by subject few topics that I knew were important for my upcoming interviews.
Mhm.
So whether it be from robotics background, computer vision, or localization, Kalman filtering, or like other type of advanced methods in
Yeah.
controls and localization. So each of those things I was making sure I understand them so well that I can explain in like simple English.
Yes.
Because on a hiring call, like the manager himself, he doesn't really need to hear you say a formula. He wants to understand whether you can explain it to him what he's asking. Like if he's asking me, hey, right now we are having a problem with our vehicle doing a lane change, what do you suggest? Now
Yes.
in that case, if you can't explain in very simple terms, like based on your sensors you can do this and that. I mean, you can have a feedback loop for it to measure the distance for collision and make the necessary lane change. Uh, it becomes very difficult for them to gauge what type of a candidate you are, because every company wants someone who can represent very well, or like speak ideas very well.
Sure.
So that's one thing I wanted to make sure I had a strong hold on, because research taught me a bit about like communicating science.
Yes.
So it's very important to be able to do that in simple language. So I
Got
was
it.
preparing on the side for that. I think it helped me. I don't know what I would change if you are forcing me to think. I guess one thing I would change is the number of hours I was spending on programming.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think I was spending quite a lot. In fact, what I should have done was understand the algorithms themselves
Yes.
rather than just wasting time coding and
Yeah.
seeing the output. If I would have just understand the algorithm itself, that would have made more sense. But that's like very small thing.
Yeah. That's a very small. Pivoting towards some company specific questions.
Sure.
How did you come across your specific role of simulation scenario engineer at your company, Motional?
Yeah, so I think this was pretty late in my job search, very close to my 90-day of unemployment.
Yeah.
So like 3 weeks, or I think not 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks before like the deadline of 90 days, I knew about the company actually, because like I mentioned, I had done some research work. So Motional has two parent companies, Aptiv and Hyundai Motors.
Mhm.
So Aptiv I knew a lot about because my brother's best friend works there. And then while I was preparing for interviews at Aptiv, I somehow started doing some related research work on the company itself
Mhm.
and found out about Motional. And Motional as a company stood out to me a lot because they were the first in the automotive race to actually have a robo taxi,
Okay.
like the first ever robo taxi, and that was in Singapore. So I started reading a lot more about the company. Turns out they have the largest operating fleet of robotaxis currently in the US.
Wow.
And the company has been around for quite a long time, but it was just incubated with like under Aptiv and Hyundai Motors.
Got it.
So since they went independent last year, they've had like a lot of publicity and they've been doing pretty well.
Mhm.
And I was very curious to see if I could find any roles which were, relevant to my um, expertise or like whatever I knew. So it was evident from there, like the open jobs, that like simulation scenario engineer was one role which I would be very comfortable with,
Uh-huh.
because it's something I've done in my research work as well. Apart from that, there were quite a lot of other roles which I applied for, especially in the robotics area. And I think my first interview was for simulation scenario engineer. Like I spoke to my manager and he was trying to explain like this is like a new team, and there was like a lot of back and forth questions about, oh, what is this team going to do, and he was like, oh, what do you know about simulation stuff, this and that. So it was a very good conversation, and from the get-go I had a feeling like, he and I would match really well, as like, an employee under this, reporting to this manager. So I felt nice about that role. And then I actually found the role, just to answer your question in specific, I actually found out about the role through their website and not
Yeah.
LinkedIn, because this was not posted on LinkedIn.
Got it. But you
So
knew about the company though, right? So you knew
yeah,
about the
yeah.
company. So you had the thought of just going through their website and
Through
search
the
for the specific
website.
roles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got
So I think that's an important thing, because I feel like not all companies post their roles
on
first
LinkedIn.
on LinkedIn. They might just do that on their website first.
Mhm.
So yeah, it goes both ways.
Got
Some
it.
companies post it on LinkedIn first. So
Got it.
yeah, so I found the company's role through their website, and then I just applied through the website, got a call for the screening, and then yeah, the interview.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, that kind of brings me to the next question. Like, how did you get the interview for this role? And you basically mentioned it was directly you just applied online and you got an email and then that's how it went. There was no like any other recommendation or anything that you had to put through to get the interview.
No, yeah, no. So I had no contacts in the company,
Uh-huh.
because the active contact could only refer me to
Yes.
active jobs, not the Motional jobs, because Motional went independent, right? Like a year back. So I had nobody I knew in that company, so I just like letter of intent and the
Yeah.
resume, and then that's it.
Got it. What was the interview process like? Like how many interviews and how did what was the gap between the interviews and how did it kind of go?
Right. So I think because I had a time crunch, like I had only 3 weeks left.
Yes.
My first screening call came pretty late. So it was because I think it was because they had to look for a time which was suitable for the HR person and me to get on a
Mhm.
call. So that was pretty late. I think that was a week after I applied, which is early by some standards, but late for me. so once I was on the call, I the first thing I told her was, hey, this is my situation. I was very honest about it.
Yes.
I was like, hey, this is my situation. I'm an international student. I'm currently on F1 visa. I have my EAD card already.
Mhm.
What I need you to help me out with, is getting this interview process out as fast as you
Us.
can, because I have very less time. And because I was so candid and honest, I think the HR person, she was very impressed, and she was like, I can get that sorted out for you. So um, I think when I got the job, the first person I reached out to was her. I
Yes.
was like, thank you so much for speeding up the process. because she got me my call with the manager just the next day, like the day after the screening was done.
Got
And the call I had with my manager was around 45 minutes.
it. Hmm.
It was just a lot of back and forth between, what this new role is going to be about, because in the automotive industry there's no existing role which has like my job title. So it was very different for them, and he was just uh, new to this type of work as well. So he was trying to explain me, he was trying to understand my take on this kind of work, what it would do to the company. He wanted to hear my thoughts. I
That's
wanted to hear from him, what is like the long term goal for this kind of role. How does it transition into the overall vision of the company? So that actually helped both of us understand each other quite a lot.
yes.
And again, I ended with the same thing. I told him, hey, I really am on a time crunch. I have like 2 weeks left. If you are considering on giving me a chance, then please can we speed up the process? I've already spoken with the HR about this,
Yeah.
and he was very nice about that. He said, yeah, I know your situation. That's why we are trying to speed up. So I was like, that's amazing. So very lucky in that sense,
Yeah.
that I found a nice set of people who were also very considerate of my time. So I think the next interview, which was the full technical
Hmm.
interview, like a 3 hour long one, was the week after.
Got it.
So the week after my call with the manager, and I had three interviews in that. One was a team lead who leads a different team,
Hmm.
but in the same department,
Yeah.
but he leads a different team. Then one was like one of my coworkers. Now he interviewed me, and the last person was also someone else from a different team. So I had three interviews. They were all half an hour long each, and then there was some break. And I think the interview with my coworker was quite long because obviously he wanted to understand a little bit more about who
Absolutely.
they are going to hire. So it was fun. I enjoyed the interview process a lot more, I would say. um, the waiting period was quite taxing because
Yeah.
I had very good idea that this is I might get this job,
Yeah.
based on how long the interview process went and how positive responses I got from
Absolutely.
during the interview itself.
Yeah.
Um, so towards the end of my time, I just wrote an email because I was like on 85th day of my unemployment. I wrote an email to my HR. I was like, hey, I have 5 days left. And she's like, yeah, check your email right now. And there was the offer letter. So
Oh,
I was
that's awesome. Yeah, that kind of brought me to the next question. How long
yeah.
after your last interview you got the offer? And you mentioned it was like a couple of days, and then you got it,
Yeah. It was almost, I think not couple of days. I think it was 8 to 9 days.
right? Okay.
Yeah, it was 8 to 9 days, and I was just very stressful because
I mean,
all
I'm sure. I'm sure.
because all my other interview processes were like taking the standard time. I told all of them like I don't have time, but like some companies they have their standard way of doing things, so they didn't get back to me on time. Uh, so I was like, I just have to hope like one of them
Absolutely.
reaches out. So
That's wonderful.
yeah.
uh, any last piece of advice for any international student who might be seeking a full-time job opportunity in the US?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, make sure you're not in my kind of situation, that you're looking for a job 2 weeks after you have your EAD start date. I was very lucky, so don't play with your luck. That would be my first recommendation. Second is, I think starting early would help a lot of people, but if you are a student right now, my first suggestion to you is, you know, understand what you are really interested in.
Mhm.
Sometimes we apply for jobs which we think we can get an offer from because, obviously job security is the first thing for us as international students, which is
Yeah.
quite important. But I would say it's equally important to understand what you're interested in because that shows in your interview process. Like as a hiring manager, my manager, after I got hired, said that to me on my face. He's like, the moment I spoke to you, I understood that, you're a kind of motivated person and someone who will take up on a lot of work once he enters the team, because this is a new team.
Mm-hmm.
So just talking to you, we could understand from your background that you are someone who doesn't just is not okay with enough.
Yes.
You always take that extra step. So these kind of things are only visible through your words and your actions during the interview. If you're very passionate about that kind of work, and if you can show that from your previous experiences. So that's my first suggestion, is make sure you understand what you're interested in, why you are interested in that, I think is more important as well, because that gets you a lot more talking points, and maybe a little bit out of the box thinking, which your prospective employers might uh, appreciate. So that is very important. The second thing I would suggest is, if you are applying for a more technical kind of interviews, like there are going to be technical interviews,
Mm-hmm.
just make sure you understand what the role is about,
Yep.
because they are not going to ask you something which is very irrational in your technical interview. So you might waste a lot of time preparing for a bunch of algorithms, but it's very important for you to understand like which algorithms are more important to them for
Yeah.
that kind of role, because it's very rare that I've seen automotive company, for example, is going to ask you to write some type of I don't know, boolean class expression doing blah 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 blah. They're not going to ask. They are going to ask you a very mathematical algorithm, like how many number of islands are there in this matrix, blah 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 stuff, questions like that, very very robotics oriented. So it's important you have a good grasp on them and you don't waste a lot of time doing other things. And the third and last point I would say, um, for preparation is just use your contacts. It's
Yeah.
important to build contacts when you're in the university,
Yes.
because some students you are studying with currently might already have jobs lined up.
Yeah.
And those are the first people you need to reach out to, because they can help you guide through the process. And the reason I'm saying that is because when I was applying for jobs, pandemic was there. So
Yeah.
the situation and conditions of job applications and how the interview process was going to happen was very different from the people who I was talking to. Like, for example, my friends from Purdue, if I were to refer to them about what the process is like, they had a different take, because that was pre-pandemic for some of them,
Mm-hmm.
when they had applied for a job. So gauge your situation well, and your first and foremost source of information should be people you are studying with, because if they have already jobs lined up, they've just gone through the process. They understand what are companies today looking for, not someone like, for example, me. If you are watching this video in 2025 and you reach out to me about, hey, what was the job search like in pandemic, it might be very different answer, right? So
Absolutely.
uh, so leverage your contacts, any and all of them, but first and foremost, make connections with who you study with. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, those are some great insights. Thank you so much for your time, Siddhant. Really appreciate it.